Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Coming today with another general episode, not so much a best bets episode. We'll get to one of those again tomorrow, but it's been a bit since we've really recapped. Been about 10 days since we recapped really the landscape of college basketball. Where now we're 3 weeks from Selection Sunday, so it's coming up fast. A lot of teams are teetering on that bubble right now. And this weekend, I think, really, put teams on one side or the other of that a bit more firmly. With each week that passes, teams are either losing games that they shouldn't or winning big games that are putting them in a position to make it in March. So another big, exciting weekend of games.
Yeah, definitely another fun weekend of games. It's like I've said before, it's probably going by a little bit too fast at this point, and definitely, I'm definitely ready for conference tournament season, and maybe not so much the NCAA tournament just yet, but it's just these conference games, they get maybe a little bit repetitive. Obviously, I'm not going to wish them away, but definitely, yeah, we're definitely flying by right now.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, we're going to recap a few of the games from the weekend, and then dive into some talk about some of the highlights of the week, and then we'll discuss the bubble of the tournament before previewing some games for this week. So going back to Friday night, rivalry of Michigan State, Michigan. This was their first meeting that they'll have, I believe, in the next 10 days. Going back to Friday, I think they play again next Sunday. Something like that. So Michigan State was at Michigan here. This game, Michigan was favored, I believe. What did it close at? 3, 2.5?
Yeah, three and a half.
Yeah. And this was actually a bet that we had given out. We were on Michigan State here. And I believe were they down at the half?
I believe they're down a few. I actually forget the halftime score.
Yeah. But regardless, they ended up, coming out in the second half and really pouring it on here against Michigan, taking care of business 75-62. So a huge 13-point win on the road here, which moved them back into first place in the Big Ten standings. Michigan down to second, and now Maryland in third. So the end of this Big Ten regular season should be interesting, especially as we'll talk about later in the episode. Michigan State plays Maryland at Maryland here on Tuesday night. So, but this was a great game, big win for Michigan State on the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Michigan State was down 4 at halftime, had a big early second half run to really make their mark on this game. And yeah, they started off the game with a pretty big run as well. I thought they were honestly just gonna keep the lead. I thought they kind of asserted their dominance on the interior from the start of this game, and they were able to slow down the Danny Wolf Vlad Golden attack as much as you can. I mean, if you can they held them. I believe Michigan still shot like 18 of 29 inside the arc, but Michigan State was able to turn them over a decent amount. As we've talked about with Michigan, it's typically a pretty big issue with them is with turnovers, and they'll turn it over against pretty much anyone. But the real story of this is Jace Richardson. I think he's turning into an absolute star. I mean, he's been unbelievable in his last 5 or 6 games. I believe he had 21 in this game. He was incredible. The creation is really what they need out of him, and he's been able to provide that. And the shot making is something that this team has really lacked all year, but he's been able to, step up to the plate and provide that. And I think personally, a lot of people were calling this team a little bit of a fraud after their run that they went through to start Big Ten play, but I think they're kind of proving that they're all the way legit. And obviously they don't have like the top end star power, but having Jace Richardson emerge the way he is making a case for them to be able to make a run to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, no, he's really broken out, which is huge for Michigan State because the guard play has been kind of the question mark, right? They're way down in efficiency as well from 3-point land in comparison to last year. So this is big for them. Next game, Houston, Iowa State. Iowa State was here without two of their guards, Gilbert and Curtis Jones, and they really needed to rely on like guys like Tamin Lipsey, Momcilovic to step up. But ultimately, like it's not enough against the Houston defense. As good as they are, held another opponent under 60 points, 68-59 in this one. LJ Cryer had a huge game for Houston, had 28, probably his season high.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State from the jump was at kind of a disadvantage. It kind of looked like more of a throwback TJ Otzelberger lineup from his early days at Iowa State back like 3 years ago, when it was basically all defense and there just wasn't a ton of firepower on the floor. And if you don't have that weak side shooting to beat Houston's defense, it's never really going to go all that well. And they had to trust Nate Heisey to make some shots. He went 2 for 3 from 3, but at the end of the day, having a guy like Curtis Jones in this game would have been massive, and Keyshawn Gilbert to at least get in the lane and create opportunities for others. But they shouldn't have enough offensive firepower to get it done.
Yeah, no. Then another game, Tennessee, Texas A&M. This was Texas A&M -2. This is actually a play we gave out. Unfortunately, didn't go our way. Tennessee got 8 3-pointers out of Chaz Lanier and a 77-69 road win here.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee 13 of 27 from 3 on the game. And just like my main takeaway from this game is, I know Buzz Williams and A&M, they have their principles on the defensive end. They really try to deny the rim and, force teams to hit those, spot up 3 opportunities. But you're playing against one of the best shooters in the entire country. If you're going to give the guy clean looks, I don't really understand what you expect here. I mean, he's the only guy on this entire roster that I'm scared of to make shots. Like, I'm not scared of Sakai Ziegler hitting shots. I'm not scared of Gainey hitting shots. He went 2 for 5, but there comes a time where you need to just go away from your defensive scheme just a little bit and at least just try to stay attached to Lanier. And they didn't even think about doing that, especially in the first half. He started 6 of 6 and he was getting very clean looks. It wasn't like he was, he had to create his own looks or anything like that. He was kind of just standing on the wing, forcing A&M to get in the rotation that's just how their defenses run. And Lanier was getting clean looks for the entire first half. And, I think this was more on the Aggies than it was on, Tennessee hitting a bunch of shots, and A&M's going to be susceptible to that with their style. But there just comes a time where you need to kind of switch up what you're doing. But Buzz Williams, pretty stubborn with the way he plays, and I didn't really expect anything less. But if there was one guy that was going to beat you, it was Lanier, and you got to do something different.
Yeah, no, I think the Tennessee. This isn't so much about the Tennessee offense, right? I saw a clip of Seth Greenberg today talking about the Tennessee offense and can they find consistency? That's really the biggest question mark, right? They've had to rely a lot on Lanier to make shots, and if he's not making shots, then it really falls on Sakai Ziegler, who's really not an offensive threat, especially as a shot maker. So, can they find consistency here? And that's probably their biggest question mark heading into March, because if they can't, it's going to be, I think, much of the same. Maybe they make it to the Sweet 16, and then ultimately, I think the road might end there because their offense just isn't good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it'll depend on matchups. Obviously, that's what it always depends on in the tournament. But this is the same old Rick Barnes with Tennessee. I'm pretty certain of that. The offense just doesn't have enough firepower. If you run Lanier off the line, he turns into a way different player. He doesn't have the dynamism that Dalton Connect had last year. We're not really comparing him to Connect anymore like we were at the beginning of the year. And I don't trust anybody else on this team to make shots. Sakai Ziegler with the ball in his hands trying to make plays against high quality defenses, it's not going to end well. And if it does end well, then I'll shut my mouth. But I really don't believe in this Tennessee offense at all.
Yeah.
On a scale. Obviously, the offense is fine. in a vacuum. But when comparing them to like the elites of the country, it's not quite there.
Comparing them to like Alabama,
Yeah,
that kind
it's
of
not like it's not
right.
even close.
Like,
Like they're probably the 10th best offense in this league. Like I think
yeah.
that's pretty fair to say. If not, maybe even a little worse. Like there's a lot of good teams in this league. So
Yeah, and speaking of Alabama, just wanted to quickly mention their game. They beat Kentucky for the second time. Obviously, Kentucky was without Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler. Also lost to Tega Owe. He was in foul trouble all night. Picked up his fifth foul. I forget, with maybe like 5 or 6 minutes left in the game. He only had 2 points. It was pretty much a non-factor. But from the beginning of this game, it looked like Kentucky was going to maybe blitz Alabama. They started up 20-9. They could not miss. I think they had 20 points with like 15 minutes to go in the first half. But then Alabama just went nuclear. They were up, I think, 4 or 6 at halftime, and ultimately ended up winning 96-83.
yeah, and that was the first game all year that Otaowe hadn't scored double digits. I think that's kind of a crazy stat from a guy that's not like a 20 to 25 point per game scorer. Like just the consistency that he's brought into this team all year is pretty impressive. And not enough people have really talked about him. But I mean, Aiden Holloway has been absolutely incredible for Alabama all year long. Like the shot making has made a huge leap in year two from year one at Auburn, where just he shot like 30% from three, and it just didn't work out there. But he looks extremely confident. He looks like just a completely different player. So credit to him for putting the work in the offseason. I know we talked about him a little bit, and we didn't really expect him to continue this like elite level shot making, but it's all the way there, and he's shooting like close to 50% in league play. So yeah, credit to him.
Yeah. Couple other things we wanted to shout out from this past week. Cody, I'll let you start here. UC San Diego put a whooping on Hawaii last night. And I watched their first game against Hawaii back. I was kind of a sicko. It was a midnight tip and stayed up till after 2 watching that game. But in that game, they were down at halftime at Hawaii. And last night was a wire-to-wire win. By the looks of it, won by about 40 points.
Yeah, they dominated Hawaii last night. This team's pretty incredible, and if they're going to sit on the 12 line against somebody on the 5 line, I don't know who's really sitting there right now. It could be like a Purdue at this point. Like I'm pretty scared for any team that has to face
them. Get
them.
them out of my tournament.
Yeah, so they've done a little bit too much work. They're probably going to sit on like the 5 line, and a team like UC San Diego that still kind of has an outside shot as an at-large, they'd probably have to run the table and lose in the conference title game to get a 2 bid Big West, which I know a lot of people are kind of cheering for that. But UC San Diego, they're sitting at 35th in KenPom right now, so they're like actually one of the elite teams in the country. 24-4 on the season and 14-2 in a Big West that's pretty loaded with some really talented teams. Like I know Cal State Northridge is on a really nice run right now, and Santa Barbara and Riverside, they're all really solid, along with UC Irvine, who they beat on the road in a revenge game. So they're not like a extremely like, I'm not gonna say they're not a fun team to watch, but they don't have like a ton of pop. But they just get the job done. Their turnover margin's elite. I believe they're top 25 in both offensive and defensive turnover rate in the entire country. So they're definitely going to be an extremely tough out in March, and hopefully they either get through the Big West or they end up getting an at-large, because there are a lot of teams on the bubble that we're going to talk about here in a minute that UC San Diego would be favored on a neutral floor, and I truly believe that they would beat a lot of these teams that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, no, they're legit. After like I said, they were down at halftime in that game. I think they ended up winning by 12, but they really put it on them in the second half. They're a very dynamic team, very fun to watch. Like last night, they poured it on. But the team I wanted to shout out, I'm buying a lot of stock in their coach after watching them a bunch this week. BYU head coach Kevin Young, formerly with the Suns. This team, their offense is legit. They have a ton of shot makers. Put up 91 against Kansas when they just ran. I really thought with about 13 minutes left that Bill Self might just want to call timeout, take his team to the locker room, and get on the plane and go home, because it was that ugly. You know, BYU was getting whatever they wanted. They were making every shot. Kansas was struggling to get anything going on the offensive end. And then last night seemed like a letdown spot at Arizona, and Kevin Young had his team ready to go. They hit another, I think they hit 14 threes last night, 14 of 31. Richie Saunders was incredible this week. Had 23 on 8 of 10 last night, including the game-winning free throws, which for some I know was a bit of a questionable call. But, you know, probably a little bit of contact there. But, you know, they just kept hitting big shots. Cannon Catchings off the bench hit, I think he had 15 or 14 in 15 minutes, 4 threes, just very, very efficient offense. And the one thing about Kevin Young's offense that I'll say, and they alluded to it a bit on the broadcast last night, is like every time they come out of a timeout, it seems like it's an automatic bucket. It's incredible. He's always got something drawn up. They had an incredible play last night that was like a little bit of misdirection to a backdoor slip for a layup, you know, out of a timeout. And it felt like, especially in the second half in crunch time, they always got a bucket out of a timeout. So certainly props to BYU. They're now sitting at 5th in the Big 12, 19-8 overall. And, you know, if this offense is making shots, I could see them making somewhat of a run in March.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm buying stock in this current team. I think the offense is like, it's really, really good. And I have some concerns about the defense there. I know Kevin Young tries to kind of mask the deficiencies of this defense. There's not a ton of rim protection. And there's not a ton of like, you know, what do you call it? Like versatility really on the perimeter. There's not a ton of athleticism either to guard guys one-on-one. So they really pack it in and try to limit rim attempts and try to force you to win over the top. And so I think he's doing all of the right things. And that's why I want to buy BYU like long-term stock as long as Kevin Young is there. And he keeps accumulating like young talent. Like obviously he's going to get AJ DeBonsta next year, and they have some guys there this year. And yeah, obviously this year, this team is, when they make shots, they're one of the better teams in the entire country. And when they feel super comfortable in the offensive end, like they're really hard to stop. So definitely a lot of credit to what they're doing right now. And yeah, certainly buying long-term stock. I just have some pretty significant concerns about their defense. I don't think they can mask the personnel issues that they have like all year long.
No, but like this team for next year, especially if, you know, a lot of this roster remains intact, could be a pretty scary team with DeBonta coming in.
Yeah. Like I think Yegor Demon should come back for another year. I don't think he's all that ready to play in the NBA right now. Like his like own like personal creation, like on the ball, it's not really there. He's a really gifted passer, and he makes a lot of really good reads and a lot of very impressive passes in like tight windows, but I don't think he's ready as a scorer. Like if he went to the NBA, I don't really think he wouldn't see all that many benefits, wouldn't see all that much playing time in year one, in my opinion. So if he came back for another year and played with DeBonsta, and I didn't see the rest of the class, and they'll probably get some solid transfers just because this landing spot is a really enticing one for transfers just because the offense is so well run and there's a ton of firepower. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to be a part of that.
Yeah, and they got a bunch of guys coming back too. Like if Demon were to come back, they also have Richie Saunders coming back, who's really taken a leap.
I didn't realize he was coming back.
Yeah, he's a junior. So Catchings, and then like Dallin Hall should be back. Kada should be back. Like this team could be really good next year. Should be really good.
Yeah, I think Catchings is probably gone. I think he's borderline the best prospect on this team. I know a lot of boards would have Demon, but maybe they run it back. I don't know.
I think he should probably come back for one more, but we'll see.
I think he has the most upside out of this, between him and Demon for sure.
Yeah. But moving on, going to jump into another edition. We did this a few weeks ago of in or out. What we currently feel is the outlook for this team. If you had to ask us right now, 3 weeks from now, will this team be in the tournament or out of the tournament as we're looking at our bracket? The first one, this one probably appeals to a lot of listeners to this podcast, a lot of our fans. North Carolina, who's obviously had a rocky season, but playing a little bit better of late, but really just beating up on pretty lame competition. Tomorrow night playing at Florida State, another big one for them.
Yeah, have they beaten anybody of significance this year? At UCLA, I guess the game we were at.
Yeah,
Like what else? Like kind of looking through their schedule right now, like SMU. Well, like who has SMU beaten? SMU hasn't beaten a soul all year long.
They beat up on Notre Dame.
It's just North Carolina's not getting in. I just don't see it. I don't see the path. They would have to beat Duke at home, and I think it's a horrific matchup for them. We kind of talked about that before and after that first matchup. I don't see it really at all. And we've talked about this roster just doesn't really fit together, and the front court issues aren't getting solved. So
yeah, if they lose tomorrow, I think 100% not making it. They have Miami and Virginia Tech left before Duke. Those 2 wins, they should win both of those games, but both of those games are insignificant to their tournament fate. So tomorrow night is huge. Even though Florida State's not a great team either, like it's on the road against a solid team. So UNC, if I had to say right now, they're not going to be in.
Yeah, look out for Miami on Saturday, though. I've heard they're a pretty feisty group. They still have some fight left. But if they beat them, there's actually no chance. But even if they beat Florida State, it's not really a needle moving win. That's a team that's not really playing all that well. I know they've won like 3 of their last 5, but they don't really have any significant wins either.
No.
This whole league just sucks. There's nothing in this league. Like it's Duke and Clemson and Louisville, and there's really nothing else after that.
Yeah, no, I agree. The next one, Arkansas. Arkansas, as we've talked about, continuing to play better basketball. They beat Missouri last night at home, down at halftime. Came back and won by, I believe, 7, 92-85. And now find themselves, firmly on the bubble. Some bracketologists have them in, some have them out. Is this SEC just bias, or do they deserve to be in?
I think they're in. I think they've done enough. I think they have a lot of really good wins this year, like road win at Kentucky, just beating Missouri on Saturday. Beat Michigan earlier in the year, I believe, right?
Yeah, which is aging very well.
Very well, yeah. I think they have enough wins. Any win that you get in the SEC at this point is a really good win. And I have a thought on the SEC here in a few minutes, so I'm not going to get into it too much. But I think if they just keep stacking up decent wins, like they're going to play Texas at home, there's not a ton left on the schedule. But like I said, any win in this league is a good win. So sitting at 5-9 in the league, like looks bad on the surface, but I think that's 5 good wins. So I think Arkansas is in right now.
Yeah, I think they're going to be really close. We'll see how they fare over these next few weeks, but they seem to be trending in the right direction. So I'm actually going to predict that they end up in the last 4 in, and they play in a first 4 game in Dayton on one of the first 2 nights.
Yeah, I like that. This version of the bubble, I mean, depending on who ends up on the bubble, like obviously we're going to talk about Gonzaga here in a second, but this version of the bubble, like it really isn't fantastic. It's not really all that good. I wish like the committee would take into consideration some more mid-majors just for my sake. I just like seeing these top end mid-majors that don't win their leagues just have a chance, at least in those first 4 games. I think they would make for more appealing games for me anyway. So like seeing Arkansas UC Irvine or UC San Diego battle it out in the first four would be pretty fun for me.
Yeah. The next one, Oklahoma. They had a big win Saturday, 93-87 over Mississippi State. And like, I know before the game, Lenardi had them first four out. Now he has them last four in. For me, I just have never been a fan of this Oklahoma team. I know they were one of the last four standing undefeated teams. So they've probably maybe done enough, but I have them out personally just because of like the fall off that they've had over the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the margin that they've lost in some of these games makes me want to say that they're going to be out and miss the tournament. I personally wouldn't really love to see them in. Their defense is really rough to watch, and this is just the classic Porter Moser non-con into conference. Like, I believe they were undefeated last year too before Big 12 play, and then they just spiraled out of control and ended up missing the tournament. I believe they were one of the first teams out, but I would say they're out right now, but like again, like there's too many opportunities in this league. They win two of their last four, and I think they can get in the tournament with maybe a win in the conference tournament. So it'll be interesting to see how the committee evaluates these SEC teams that are 6-12 or 7-11 in the league.
Yeah. Like I said, I think I think they'll be out. I don't really see them doing enough here over the last four or in the conference tournament to get the job done. But next team out of the Big Ten, Ohio State, had a rough week this week. Lost at home to Northwestern, lost at UCLA today. They're spiraling. They have a bunch of good wins, but then they also have a bunch of bad losses. If I had to say, which this is hard to say, right? Because I could see this Ohio State team just as easily like messing around in the Big Ten tournament and winning a few games, and you're like, all right, they're probably in now. But I'm going to say they're going to miss the tournament, and I'm just more so forecasting the next 2 weeks and then conference tournament. I think they're trending in the wrong direction and ultimately won't make it.
Yeah, I agree. If I had to guess how the rest of the season is going to go, I'm going to say it's going to go pretty poorly. That loss against Northwestern is just a brutal loss. Like, without Leach and Barnheiser, who are done for the year, and you lose by 21 at home and you score 49 points, like, it's a pretty horrific effort. You followed up, lost to UCLA on the road. No real fault there, and there's no real like opportunity to gain much traction. Like, you can't have like a real resume building win in your last three. You play USC, you play Nebraska at home, and then you go to Indiana to end the season. Who Indiana's on the bubble as well, believe it or not. Like, they kind of came back from the dead with Mike Woodson's brilliant coaching over the last couple of weeks. But Ohio State, their resume right now, I'd say it's right on the bubble. It's probably a last four in quality, maybe even a little bit better than that. But like you said, I think they're ultimately going to end up being out.
Yeah,
I could see them losing. I could see them losing the last three games and then losing their first game in the tournament and in the Big Ten tournament and being out.
Yeah, Lenardi had them projected, I believe, as a 10 as of Friday. So after the loss today, my guess would be maybe one of the last 10s, maybe one of the first 11s. We'll see. But next team, Gonzaga, who we've talked about a bunch, and they have yet to really beat anyone of significance, and showed again last night. Played St. Mary's at home. They were minus 6.5 in this game, in a game they really needed to have. And they came out and started, senior day. They started Coach Few's son, right? They got blitzed from the jump, down 9-0. They ended up making it interesting. I think tied it up in the second half, early in the second half, and then ultimately lost by, I forget what the final was, but it was
lost by 7.
Yeah, 7 or 9. Yeah. So tough loss, really detrimental to them. And now they got to go play, I believe, at Santa Clara on Tuesday. So finding themselves in a tough spot where I think that line projects at like Gonzaga -1 or 2. So they're in murky waters, I would say.
Yeah, they need that game. If they don't beat Santa Clara, they're like in actual danger. I mean, I wouldn't say they're in like, I don't know if it's panic mode quite yet, because I mean they follow that up on Saturday at San Francisco to end the season, and then they have the WCC tournament. So, and ultimately they could win the WCC tournament, and we don't really have to worry about this. And I mean, for them to get in as just an auto bid and sitting on, I don't, they'd probably still be like a 9 or a 10 if they end up winning the league. But yeah, they don't really have any significant wins that I could really think of off the top of my head. I mean, early season against Baylor on opening night, but that's not like a fantastic win anymore. We're about to talk about them here in a second. Like a San Diego State, they beat them. Indiana, I guess, is a fine win, but besides that, there's not a ton to speak of. And I still think Gonzaga is a top 20 team in the country. Just and analytics would be on my side there. Like Ken Palm and Torvik both have Gonzaga as a top 15 team in the country, but ultimately predictive metrics don't get you in the tournament, and I don't think those should be a part of like the committee's like selection of teams, because like that's not talking about what you've done, it's talking about what they think you are and who they think you can beat. So they have work to do. They probably have to win the next 2 games to at least feel kind of safe, and they probably have to get to the WCC final and potentially beat St. Mary's to feel really, really good.
Yeah. I'm starting to think that they're going to miss, and I think it's just because of their unless they put up a nice next couple of weeks, but which they're fully capable of, but they seem to be struggling to beat the good teams this year. They don't really have much of a resume, as you just said. That Baylor win hasn't aged well, as we're about to talk about. So they may get. I have a feeling they might get thrown a bone and like last 4 in or something, just because they're Gonzaga. But I'm not really sure that this team, because of the consistency or lack thereof, that they've shown over the course of this season, I'm not sure that they deserve to be in.
No, probably not. But I mean, I'd say they've been a bit unlucky in close games. Like a lot of this close game stuff does come down to some luck, but I mean their late game execution has been pretty poor. So ultimately, do I think they deserve to get in? Probably not at this point in time. But yeah, just like I guess the name brand could end up getting them in, and they would be one of the most dangerous first 4 teams or 11 seeds or wherever they're going to end up being. Like literally nobody in the country wants to play this team, no matter how good they are. And I think they still have a ton of offensive firepower, so they're super dangerous.
Yeah, and speaking of Baylor, Baylor's the next team we're going to talk about, and they lost at Colorado yesterday, 76-74. Went 0-2 this week with a home loss to Arizona. Now lost 3 of their last 4, and looking ahead at their next 4, I think they might only win 1 game. I think they're going to win at home against Oklahoma State, who's been playing some better basketball recently. I know they got run by Kansas, but I think that game at TCU is interesting. They got Houston at home to end the season. They're at Cincinnati on Tuesday, which is not an easy win, especially on the road, the way that Baylor's been playing. So I'm gonna. I don't know if they've done enough. Like, I guess maybe this is just more like recency. I haven't really been thrilled with the way that they've played, but they got swept by Arizona. They just haven't really done much for me. They lost to UConn earlier in the year, right? So I think they're out. Personally, I have not thought Baylor's been very good.
Yeah, I mean, they have a better resume than Gonzaga. I think that's kind of fair to say, outside of me getting blitzed by them by 38 on opening night. But I mean, they beat St. John's, a miracle buzzer beater in the Bahamas, beat Arkansas. They have more significant wins than Gonzaga, but just for recency bias, like I don't love watching this team, and I really don't want to watch them in the tournament. Outside of watching Rob Wright and VJ Edgecombe create off the dribble, it's just not a super fun team to watch for me. And their defense is pretty horrendous. And the fact that Josh Ojonwuna is out for the season makes it even worse. Norchad Omier has to play the 5 for basically all 40 minutes, and we know he's not the greatest rim protector out there. So just their lack of size has really put them at a disadvantage in the Big 12. So, yeah, I could see them winning just one of their next 4. I mean,
they already lost to TCU at home.
Yeah. They've kind of been dealt kind of an unfair hand just with all the injuries they've had all year long. But, yeah, you got to deal with it. It's not the college football playoff where you can get rid of a team or add a team based off of an injury. I think that's a whole other conversation. I think that's kind of stupid. But overall, yeah, I can see them winning one of their next 4 games and ultimately not making it.
Yeah. And then the last one, Vanderbilt, picked up a big win, much needed yesterday against Ole Miss. I think they get in. Just going to cut right to it. I think that they have enough quality wins. Granted, most of them are at home, but I think they've been good enough to get in.
I agree. They have way too many good wins. They beat Tennessee at home, Kentucky at home, and just beat Ole Miss at home. I know their defense has kind of regressed in league play and it hasn't looked fantastic, but I think they've done enough. I don't really recall what they did in non-conference. I think they had some pretty solid wins, but
their only loss, I think was to Drake.
Yeah, and that's not even a bad loss. I think that's a Q2 loss, maybe at worst. So, yeah, I think Vanderbilt's in, and I think it's just a product of the SEC lifting up other, like the bottom of the SEC, if that's what you want to call Vanderbilt. I think they're more middle of the pack, but yeah, I would say Vanderbilt's in.
Yeah. So it should be an interesting next couple of weeks and then conference tournaments before we see where the bubble ultimately lands, who's in, who's out. So, another team that could be headed that way is UConn. They've probably done enough at this point, but they're not very good either. So probably another conversation, but before we preview a few of these games, wanted to follow up that Vanderbilt question with, how many of these SEC teams are going to get in this tournament? There's 16 teams in the league. I think right now 13 are projected in, with Georgia just outside on the bubble. I think they're second team out according to Lenardi right now. So how many do you end up in?
I'm not sure. It depends on how the committee looks at like a conference record. I don't think that's actually like a part of like the team sheet and how they evaluate these teams, but it's going to cause an uproar with a team sitting at 6-12 in the league and getting into the tournament as a 9 seed. Like we could see that realistically with Vanderbilt or Arkansas. Like Arkansas is 5-9 in the league right now, sitting as a last 4 in. Texas is 5-9. I think they're at they're like a 9 or a 10 seed at the moment.
Who, and Texas?
Yeah.
I think they got bumped to an 11.
Oh, okay. But either way, like there's a lot of bubble teams right now. Like even Oklahoma, they're 4-10 in the league, and a lot of people consider them in. So I just kind of want to get ahead of the curve. So like on Selection Sunday, when people are complaining about these conference records and like, oh, you got to play well in your own league to be considered a tournament team. Well, this is probably the best league arguably in the history of college basketball. Like they did so much work against all of the other power conference teams. I forget what the exact record was. It was something ridiculous. They lost 20 games as an entire league in non-conference, and they played the toughest schedule. And I just think as many teams that deserve to get in should be in. We don't really need to look at conference record. I've just seen so much go on about that. I think we ultimately end up with 13 at the most, because I do think one of these teams plays their way out, and it's looking like it's going to be Georgia. They've been kind of reeling as of late, but if they would have beat Auburn on Saturday, which was a really good game, which is just another byproduct of how good this league is, with them being able to compete with the number 1 team in the country on the road. I just think it goes to show that 13 teams at the very least deserve to get in the tournament.
Yeah. I think we end up getting 12. And I think that I think it could very well be that final regular season game, Texas, Oklahoma. I think that game could determine which team of those two gets in, maybe depending on how they do in the conference tournament. But I think one of those two teams is going to end up out. We'll see how they do over the next couple of weeks, but I think 12 might be my number.
Yeah, I mean, I personally want both Texas and Oklahoma out. I don't think they're.
Yeah.
I personally don't think they're good enough teams to get into the tournament. Like, just from like a predictive metric standpoint, but like their resumes, I think have been very close to good enough, and they're at least firmly sitting on the bubble. Like, I don't want to see 6 ACC teams in the tournament. Like, we know, like everyone that watches the game knows that it's just the SEC is the best league, arguably in the history of college basketball, and I think they deserve to get as many teams, despite what the record looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, going to move forward and preview a few of these games over the next few days, one from each day. First one being tomorrow, Houston at Texas Tech. If I remember right, did Texas Tech win the first one?
Yeah, in overtime.
By one, right? So Houston at Texas Tech here. I didn't see what the line opened at. Was it like Houston -1.5 or something like that? So tomorrow night at Texas Tech, Houston coming off the win yesterday against Iowa State. Texas Tech beat up yesterday on who'd they beat up on? TCU,
West Virginia.
Yeah. So big spot for both teams. I don't really know which way to go on this one because Texas Tech, I think Houston's obviously the better team. Texas Tech, it's always tough to go play in Lubbock. I would probably lean Houston, but I think Texas Tech's defense hasn't been very good of late. So I would lean Houston here in this one.
Yeah, Tech definitely had a better defensive game on Saturday against West Virginia. They're one of the worst offensive teams in the Big 12, so I don't put like a ton of stock into that. But I will never sit here and say that Houston's going to lose a game. Like, I can't confidently say that they're going to lose a basketball game. I think they can beat anyone in the country. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they beat any team in the entire nation by 15 plus. Like, they're just that good on both ends of the floor. But if there's a team that can at least have some success against their defense, it is Texas Tech, and we saw that in the first matchup. They were able to spread out this Houston defense a little bit, and they made a ton of threes. I believe they went like 12 for 30 from three in the first matchup. So being able to actually generate offense against arguably the best defense in the country is something not a lot of other teams can do. And the only thing Tech needs to do right is just have JT Toppin stay in the game longer than 4 minutes for the ejection. That was just an absolute crime. We talked about it after the last game. I still can't fathom how he got tossed for that. But if he stays on the floor, he really helps as well. Being able to get on the offensive glass against Houston, they're a little bit susceptible there as well. So, but I'm not gonna bet against Houston. So I'll say Houston wins by 5 or 6.
Yeah, I agree. Next game Tuesday, Mississippi State at Alabama. It's funny. Like, I'm looking at the Tuesday slate, and honestly, like, it's not one of those slates with a bunch of loaded games. This game just kind of probably happens to be the one that stands out, I guess. But I don't know as if I really expect much of a game here. Maybe Mississippi State hangs around a little bit, but this line projects it like Bama -10. I think Bama has their way here, much like we saw Florida have their way against Mississippi State a couple weeks ago. I think Bama puts up a ton of points here and rolls Mississippi State.
Yeah, I mean, Mississippi State's going to need 30 to 35 from Josh Hubbard again to keep this game close. I mean, and he's going to have the opportunity to do it against the Alabama drop coverage. But on the other side, I think Alabama can kind of name their number on the amount of threes they want to hit. Mississippi State's perimeter defense and just their style with Chris Jans just trying to deny the rim. I think it spells some trouble for when you have to defend like Chris Youngblood and Aiden Holloway. So I think I could see Alabama hitting 15 or 16 threes in this game and winning by 15 to 20. So yeah, I'll definitely say Alabama wins unless they have a super cold shooting night. They'd have to shoot like 20 to 25% in this game to be in danger.
Yeah, I definitely expect Bama to come out on top there in a pretty comfortable way. And then the last game we're going to preview, this one's Wednesday. Number 1 in the Big Ten, Michigan State, at number 3 in the Big Ten, Maryland. This projects around Maryland minus 4.5. For those of you that have listened, Maryland's one of the teams I'm buying a lot of stock in right now. I'm a little bit concerned about their depth. They rely heavily, especially on the offensive end, on their starters. Those 5 guys all average between 12 and 16 a game. So, it's very dependent on those guys scoring and making shots. But I have a lot of faith in them. I love Derek Queen's game. I don't know if I agree with Kevin Willard to say that, if he were, what do you say, if he were white, he'd be the number 1 pick.
White and European, he'd be number 1.
I don't know if I agree with that, but he's a really good player, and I'm really high on his game. And these guards, I think, have really meshed well together. Julian Reese's improved foul shooting, and I think just ability to finish around the rim, and he's kind of developed a little bit of like a 12-foot jump shot a little bit more consistently. I think this is a good spot for Maryland. I think they can match up pretty well with Michigan State. They have the 2 bigs in Queen and Julian Reese. Now, I am a little bit worried because Julian Reese historically has been a bit of a hack. He's improved that this season. But, if he falls into his old ways on Wednesday night, this could definitely spell trouble for Maryland. But I'm gonna go with him not doing that, showing what he's shown all season, and Maryland getting the win here against Michigan State.
Yeah, it's gonna be a really fun game. This is like definitely one of the more exciting games of the week for me. These are 2 teams that I really like this year, and Queen and Reese are great, but I think Michigan State can match up with them with their 5 big man rotation. Like Maryland's not gonna be able to foul out this front court. There's just too many options there. And what are they calling this Maryland starting 5? They're calling what, the Crab 5? Is that what they're calling this lineup? Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think their starting 5 can take them through a tournament run. I don't think having depth is all that important unless barring an injury, in a tournament run. I don't really think you need to rely on that many bench options. You're cutting out a lot of guys in the rotation come that time anyway. Like you're gonna play your guys 35 to 38 minutes. So I think they're gonna be okay long term, barring any sort of injury up until the tournament. But I don't really know if I can pick a winner in this game. I guess I'd have to lean Maryland just because they're playing at home. But Michigan State is really tough to beat in any setting, as we saw on Friday night when they beat Michigan on the road by double digits, just because they rebound the ball so well on both ends of the floor. And their guards are really starting to come along, especially with Jace Richardson. He's kind of becoming a superstar in my opinion. So I'll say Maryland wins, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Michigan State was able to win on the road.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm probably a little bit biased. I've really come to like watching this Maryland team. So I automatically was probably going to go with them anyway because they're at home. But I do think they match up pretty well with Michigan State if they can stay out of foul trouble in the front court. So should be a fun game. Should be a fun early week slate. Not a ton on Tuesday in terms of marquee games, but still some fun matchups. Like I said, Gonzaga, Santa Clara is a big one with a lot of implications for Gonzaga, and a few other ones out there as well. So other than that, hope you guys enjoy the games. And we'll have another best bets episode for you dropping on Tuesday morning. But enjoy the games, and we'll talk to you next time.